Hi everybody, this is Anne. How many of us potters have seen those beautiful jars of colored underglaze and wanted to use them to illustrate our pottery with, only to quickly talk ourselves into thinking that we can't do it for one reason or another? I'm hoping this video will take away some of those fears. I'll show you one of the biggest secrets to drawing with underglazes, the right brush. I'll show you 3 ways to use it to create beautiful imagery, and I'll demonstrate 3 simple projects that everybody can do. Many years ago, when I first started underglaze painting, I reached for the fine art brushes. In the store, they have stiff, sharp, pointed bristles for painting fine lines, but in my experience, the bristles don't stay pointed very long. Upon extended use, the bristles started to splay, separate, and break down. I started to see my fine lines becoming broader, unruly, and choppier with unwanted results. A few years ago, I found manicurist fingernail detailing brushes. Not only were they made for use with harsh materials, but they really kept their points longer than fine art brushes. All of the underglazes I'm using are Amico Velvet brands, but there are many great brands out there. First, I'll give you a retro project design so you can practice drawing simple straight lines. I already painted one side of this cup. On the bare side, I divided it into thirds vertically with a light line. Before drawing the imagery, I thought I'd add a layer of blocky colors first. I lightly penciled in alternating squares and rectangles in each section as markers. Starting with the intense yellow, I filled in my blocks. You don't have to be exact with your blocks. I switched to a mixture of bright red and intense yellow and painted smaller shapes over the yellow, varying the sizes, placements, and shapes. I switched again to just the bright red and repeated this exercise. When the painted blocks were dry, I drew in more overlapping blocks over the colored ones. In the remaining white spaces, I drew funky line flowers, just whatever came into my head, but connecting them to the blocks with line stems. The second layer of the project is just the drawing with the black underglaze using the detailer brush. Make sure the underglaze has the right flow, not too runny and not too dry. You'll know it's the correct flow when you just barely touch the piece with the brush tip and it leaves a consistent dark line. If you're having to re-dip the brush every quarter inch or so, then it's too dry. Add a little water to the underglaze and stir it well. If it's too runny and leaves a pale line or spreads out, put some of the underglaze out on the table and stir it around a little bit to dry it. Another tip, dry any beads of water off the brush shaft before painting or it'll drip onto the piece into a hard to clean up spot. For the straightest lines, anchor your pinky to the surface as you make your marks and hold your breath to eliminate unnecessary shakiness. Note that some of the lines are solid and some I left broken to add a little variety and character to the design. Let's expand on our simple line design. These bees may look a little complicated, but if you can draw those simple lines, it's really easy. If you look carefully, she's made up of all lines. I can make something look radial when I play with their directions. When I lightly change how far apart the lines are, I create shadows. When the lines are thick, wider, and even closer together, it can create delineation and borders. The real short, choppy lines can look like fine hairs on her legs, or create cohesion of segments like along the wings. For the bee itself, I folded a sheet of paper and drew half of the bee on the crease and cut it out. I traced around the template in different directions all over the mug. I lightly sectioned her off with a circle around the middle, a half circle at the top for the head, a band along the bottom, wing lines, antenna, and then legs extending from the body. With a medium brush, I gave her a warm wash of intense yellow along the bottom and the top. I added just a little of the orange along the borders of the circle and the bottom edge. I switched to a cool baby blue and brushed that over the circle and the wings and let it dry. As the wings are clear and would have reflections, I added little touches of pink and yellow to the cool blue. The rest is just lines. Starting at the head, I drew short, thin lines spaced so that I could make out the yellow color in between. I did the same with the upper body and the lower body above the drawn band. I'm not worried if some of the lines are a bit thicker or lighter in color, it just adds more character. I did the same thing to the bottom part of the body. For the band, I drew thicker black lines that were closer together, almost creating a solid line, but not quite, as a solid black line would flatten it out. In the circular area, I drew lines in a radial direction around the center, then worked my way out to the border. Working this way creates the illusion of depth, plus hair. For the wings, I started by completing the border around the wing, then sectioned it off into simple arced lines. As one would overlap the other, I drew short, choppy diagonal lines along the middle border to create a shadow. For the legs, I gave them dots in the center, then pulled little hairs from the border lines. Finally, I drew the border line around the rest of the body. When you add the single bee to the rest of the hive, along with the simple flower shapes in between, it makes for a fun design that flies off the surface. For the third project, I wanted to show you that you can create shading not only with lines, but with individual tiny dots. From far away, the eye blends the dots into a cohesive scene like this forest landscape. I started by lightly tracing in my skyline of tree shapes vertically across the surface, making sure to really vary their heights. As the sunlight would illuminate the outermost part of the trees, I'm starting with the intense yellow and dotting along that outer tree line. Now that I have a hint of where the trees are, I thought I would pencil in some of the tree trunks. I mixed up an avocado green. I started dotting that into the entire design, but sparsely spaced so you could still see the white of the clay underneath. Remember, green is yellow plus blue, So far, our trees are more on the yellow side, but as the leaves get denser towards the trunk, we have less light on them. The cool blues show through more, so I'm using the baby blue on the inside of the trees, but still sparsely spaced. I like a balance of color in my design. Right now, I have a lot of color from the yellow and blue side, but nothing from the red side of the color wheel. So I'm adding just a touch of light pink accents where the leaves might be reflecting some clouds. I'm adding just a little touch of the electric blue to the avocado to make it darker as we move to the intersection of the trees away from the sunlight. I'm making the dots much denser along the tree trunks, but still in clumps. Note that I do overlap some of the areas along the edges while also not touching some of the brighter colored dots. I need a contrast dark color to all these mid-range hues. I hate to reach into the black underglaze, but it's the only color I have strong enough to create that. I added a touch of the black to the darker green for a very darkest part of the design, right along the tree trunks and along the bottom section of the tree canopy. Before adding the trunks, I wanted to give the forest floor a layer of brush and plants, some of which may be receiving light and some may be out of the light. Now I can add more black to my green and fill in sections of the tree trunks in short choppy lines, as there would be leaves overlapping them. Your eye will fill in the gaps to create the vertical trunks. Just the hint of branches will finish the illusion of trees. I used the baby blue to create a skyline along my top border. Note that I'm keeping my distance from the tree line, or it'll start to look too busy. Now here's the side that I finished earlier. I added little V-shapes for birds to further the illusion of a forest line, but the rest is just dots and hints of line. The scene is very cool with touches of yellow and pink to warm it up a bit. The hope is to get an 80-20 split of warmth and coolness in your scene to be successful. When using the right tools for the job, or should I say brushes, plus a little practice, you'll definitely have a lot more success with your designs. Thanks to the newest members of our Little Street Pottery Research Facility team. If you'd like to join the team and earn a title, click on the Super Thanks button or the link to buy me a coffee. It also really helps us out if you hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. See you next time in the studio.